My family ignored me and I almost got lost, but I completely turned it around. I never imagined that one day my own family would be the biggest obstacle in my life. My name is Enrique. I'm 32 years old, and I've always been the kind of person who solves things on my own. I grew up surrounded by favoritism and neglect, and I never really had anyone supporting me. My sister Beatriz was always the center of attention, and my parents, Ana Clara and Jose Antonio, were always more concerned with pleasing her than with me. For years, I accepted this in silence, always trying to be the good son, the invisible provider, the one who carried everything on his shoulders without complaint. I gave money, emotional support, caused problems, and nothing seemed enough. There was always someone more important, more fragile, more worthy of care in their eyes. I learned to hide behind my success, to smile in public while feeling anger, pain, and abandonment inside, until everything changed in a single day, in ways I never could have predicted. I woke up that morning feeling tired, but not in a normal way. It was a tiredness that came from within, from years of accumulating pressure, stress, and emotional neglect. I had an important event at work, something that could open huge doors, but my body decided to let me know that I could no longer ignore the signals. In the middle of the meeting, I felt a tightness in my chest, a shortness of breath that made me break out in a cold sweat. People stared, but I tried to hide it. I never wanted to show weakness, never wanted to admit anything was wrong. But the body doesn't lie. When I realized I could faint at any moment, my head spun and everything went black for a few seconds. I remember hearing someone calling my name, but it was distant, as if watching from outside. It was frightening to realize that even at a critical moment, I was alone. None of my family was there. I realized for the first brutal time that no one truly cared about me the way I'd always wished. When I woke up in the hospital, surrounded by doctors and nurses, I felt a mixture of relief and anger. I'd survived, but the feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. My parents arrived later, their expressions worried, but it was more theatrical than real. Beatriz didn't even bother to show up at first. I stood there realizing that my whole life had been like this, me giving too much and receiving almost nothing. During the hours of waiting, I thought about everything I'd been through, every time I'd lent money without being asked, every time I'd covered for my sister's crises, every time I'd accepted being left out while my parents applauded her whims. It was at that moment that a tremendous clarity struck me. I needed to change. I could no longer be held hostage by this dynamic. I could no longer be the good son who carried the weight of the world while no one cared about my own well-being. For the first time, I felt like my life could be my own. In the hospital room, my friend Luisa appeared. She had always been there, but in that moment, I felt I needed her more than ever. Luisa didn't come with empty words of comfort. She came with strategy and reality. We talked at length about how I could finally set boundaries, cut toxic ties, and protect my resources. Her presence was a turning point. I felt weak, but also determined. For the first time in a long time, I realized I could use my strength consciously, not just to support others. Anger began to transform into motivation. Every injustice I suffered could become a turning point if I had the courage to act. I began to understand that family doesn't define who you are, and that respect and care are choices we need to make for ourselves. I spent the afternoon alone that day, reflecting on my life and all the sacrifices I'd made that had never been recognized. I felt sadness, but also a sense of empowerment that had long been dormant. Every memory of neglect, every moment my sister manipulated my goodwill, every gesture of indifference from my parents, all of it fueled my decision to change. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that I would face resistance, tears, and emotional blackmail, but I also knew I was finally ready to take control of my life, to set clear boundaries, and seek the emotional and financial justice I deserved. And for the first time, I felt hope. Hope that my life could be different, even if my family didn't change. I didn't need to wait for them to recognize or value me. It was time to act for myself. The first step was to organize my finances and clearly identify the vulnerabilities that had always allowed Beatrice and my parents to take advantage of me. I realized that for years I had been an emotional and financial reserve, and that this needed to stop. Luisa helped me review accounts, contracts, and properties. I discovered details I never imagined, small agreements that put me at risk without me realizing it. The feeling of discovery was shocking and liberating at the same time. I felt angry, but also clear. For the first time, I was in control. I could decide who could have access to my life and my resources, and that was empowering. Every decision I made was made consciously, not blindly. It was the first time I felt like I was truly and consistently taking care of myself. When I confronted my parents with the decisions, it was like igniting a long-hidden spark of tension. Ana Clara tried to use maternal charm, and Jose Antonio maintained his conniving silence. Beatrice cried and manipulated, but I didn't give in. I stood firm. Every threat, every false tear, every manipulative argument only reinforced my resolve to maintain clear boundaries. I felt fear because breaking ties is never easy, but I felt stronger. I realized their manipulation only worked because I allowed it, and in that moment, I decided no longer. I was ready to act for myself, to protect my health, my assets, and my emotional peace. Throughout the process, I uncovered family secrets that left me shaken, medical information that could have put my life at risk, decisions my parents hid or minimized, situations that should never have happened. Anger came on strong, but Luisa helped me channel it strategically. Instead of exploding or feeling helpless, I used this information to ensure my safety and autonomy. For the first time, I felt like I was truly defending my life, not just my wallet or my ego. I was defending my own emotional and physical existence, and this gave me unprecedented clarity about what it means to be an adult and responsible for oneself. The emotional impact was intense. During the following days, I felt a mixture of relief, fear, anger, and hope. It was strange to realize that cutting ties with family members could be liberating. Every time my sister tried to manipulate me, every time my parents ignored my feelings, I stood firm. It was painful, but also empowering. I began to feel lighter, more present with myself. One of the hardest things was accepting that I would never be the favorite child, that I would never get the affection I always wanted. But I also realized I didn't need that anymore. I could create my own support network, my own healthy relationships, my own life. The feeling of empowerment was strange because it was mixed with pain, but it was real. For the first time, I felt I didn't need to sacrifice my health or happiness to please others. I was learning that life is made of conscious choices, and that no one has the right to steal my emotional peace. It was a costly learning experience, but it gave me strength I never imagined I possessed. At the end of that initial process, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. I had not only survived a physical and emotional crisis, but I had also begun to consciously rebuild my life. Enrique, who had for so long felt invisible and overwhelmed, was now discovering he was capable of setting boundaries, taking care of himself, facing his family, and surviving emotionally. It was liberating to realize that, despite all the abandonment and manipulation, I could still choose how to live and who I related to. I felt that, finally, my life could be my own, without guilt, without emotional blackmail, without constant fear. The shock of my heart attack still haunts me. Every time I remember that tightness in my chest, every time I relive my parents' distant gaze at that critical moment, I feel a mixture of anger and gratitude. Anger because no one cared when I needed it most, and gratitude because I survived and realized I needed to change my life. That day marked the turning point, the moment I stopped being a spectator of my own existence and became a protagonist. I learned that overcoming grief isn't a magical event, but a series of conscious decisions, even amidst pain. This learning changed my perception of family, love, and responsibility. During the months that followed, Louisa was essential. She helped me solidify my legal and financial decisions, but she also provided my emotional support. Talking to someone who listened to me, validated my emotions, and guided me to act with clarity made all the difference. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I had an ally who helped me transform pain into action. Each meeting, each decision, each blockade of interference was a concrete step toward regaining my autonomy. I began to feel like I was rebuilding my life in a solid way, away from the manipulations that had consumed me for years. Beatrice reacted badly, of course. She cried, screamed, emotionally blackmailed, and tried to turn me against my own conscience. But I stood my ground. The feeling of power over my own life was greater than any guilt she tried to instill. I learned that true strength lies not in controlling others, but in controlling yourself, in setting boundaries and staying true to your own needs. It was painful, but also liberating. For the first time, I felt my energy no longer needed to be drained to sustain the illusion of a perfect family. I could live my own reality. Fear still surfaces sometimes, especially when I remember everything that happened. But now it doesn't paralyze me. It reminds me of what I've overcome. I'm afraid of what might have happened if I hadn't reacted, afraid of my body's fragility, afraid of repeating old patterns. But I also feel strong because every action I've taken to protect my health and autonomy shows that I can face adversity and emerge stronger. This awareness gives me the courage to continue, to establish healthy relationships, to live without the constant fear of being used or neglected. One of the most moving moments was realizing that even after cutting toxic ties, I could still find people who valued me. Friends, colleagues, Louisa, and other relationships I've built outside of my family showed me that support and care exist, even if they don't come from who you expect. I felt profound gratitude for this. The feeling of no longer being emotionally dependent on those who neglected me was transformative. For the first time, I realized that family isn't just blood. It's respect, care, and a genuine presence. This discovery brought peace and clarity, something I never imagined I'd experience. Throughout this process, I realized that my physical and emotional health are intertwined. The heart attack was a brutal wake-up call that my life was out of control, and taking care of myself became a top priority. I began to realize that being alone in some situations isn't synonymous with abandonment, but rather an opportunity to strengthen myself. I always thought my family should be my safe haven, but I realized I could never fully depend on someone who wasn't truly there. I started investing time in myself, in projects I'd previously neglected, in relationships that truly made sense and valued me. The moments of solitude were challenging, but also essential. I missed a family that was never there, but that couldn't paralyze me. I learned to recognize my own warning signs and take care of myself before any crisis set in. My relationship with my parents and sister changed drastically. Not because of what they changed, but because of what I chose. Louisa continued to be my support, but she also showed me that I didn't need to completely depend on anyone. The balance between receiving help and acting independently was crucial. I began to feel proud of myself, something I had never fully experienced. The sense of self-efficacy, of knowing I could protect myself, make decisions, and take care of my health was a great gift. For the first time, I felt that my choices truly mattered, that my well-being was a priority, and that I could live without feeling guilty about it. This clarity gave me the strength to face any backlash from my family. The process wasn't linear. I had days of intense anger, days of profound sadness, and days of doubt. But each difficult moment was accompanied by awareness and determination. I understood that these emotions were part of the rebuilding process and that ignoring them would be detrimental. Allowing myself to feel the pain, but not being controlled by it, was one of the greatest lessons learned. Each decision, however painful, was a step toward freedom. I felt like I was finally living my own life, not the one others imposed on me. This brought relief and hope, feelings that had long been dormant. Over time, I began to reorganize my financial life in a safe and strategic way. I sold properties, revoked shared accounts, and blocked any outside interference. The feeling of control was new and powerful. I would never again be used as someone's emotional or financial reserve. The anger and pain still linger, but now they are accompanied by awareness and strength. For the first time, I feel like I can breathe without fear of being manipulated, and that my future is mine, without guilt or obligation. It's a feeling of victory that only those who have endured years of neglect can understand. Today, I look back and see how much I've grown in such a short time. The day I had my heart attack was horrific, terrifying, but also the catalyst for my transformation. I realized that my life couldn't continue the way it was, and that no one else could define my worth. This realization changed everything. I learned that life is about choices, and that even amidst pain and betrayal, it's possible to bounce back. Every decision I've made since then has reinforced my sense of autonomy and self-care. I didn't expect it to be easy, but every effort was worth it. What surprised me most was realizing that I could still create meaningful connections outside my family. Friends, colleagues, and professionals who truly cared became my support network. I felt I no longer needed to rely on those who weren't there, and that love and care existed in many forms and places. This brought a kind of peace I never imagined I could feel. Today, I recognize my own strength, my resilience, and my ability to create a life that makes sense to me, without manipulation or guilt. I learned that true family can also be chosen. I feel anger and sadness about everything I've been through, but these emotions are now used as fuel, not as chains that bind me. The clarity I gained about boundaries, respect, and self-care allowed me to look at my sister and parents without being overcome by resentment. This transformation didn't happen overnight, but was built step by step with courage, Luisa's support, and a lot of determination. Today, I feel alive in a way I never imagined. Looking back still hurts, but looking forward is liberating. I feel like my life is finally mine. Every decision I made to cut out interference, protect my health, and set boundaries was an act of self-love. I can't change the past, but I can build the future I want. Every victory, small or large, reminds me that I am capable of facing challenges and surviving emotionally. The feeling of autonomy and freedom is indescribable, and it gives me hope that I can continue to grow and live without fear. Today, I can say, without exaggeration, that I survived my own family and became the protagonist of my life. I learned that true strength lies in standing up, even when everyone around seems indifferent, that we don't have to accept neglect or manipulation, and that it's possible to set clear boundaries, even if it hurts. That family isn't just blood, it's respect, care, and conscious choices. I'm rebuilding my life with freedom, peace, and awareness, and I know I still carry scars, but they're now part of my story of overcoming. I'm Henrique, 32 years old, and I can finally say I'm living for myself.